All right, go ahead and get started. First of all, I want everyone to know that this meeting is being recorded. We'll be posting this afterwards, then you can review it later because I'll be going through a lot of these concepts pretty quickly. And then you can also share with your teammates or, just watch it again or if you miss parts of it. The other thing I want to mention is there's a chat that's open. If you have any questions or anything that you want me to review, you can go ahead and type in the chat. I'll look at the screen periodically to make sure that I answer some of those questions. And with that, we're going to jump into today's webinar. So today's webinar is around the advanced capabilities inside Matrix. So if you're not familiar with all the basic features already, then make sure you check out our other webinar. But I'm going to make the assumption that you're very, very familiar with Matrix. You're familiar with how to use the system, how to add tasks and projects and so forth. Now I'm just showing you the other capabilities that will actually get you the most out of Matrix. So there's a previous webinar called Introduction to Matrix, where my argument is that there's 20% of the things that you can do, you can learn inside Matrix in order to get 80% of the value. Now, this webinar is focused on essentially the other 80% of capabilities inside Matrix that will help you get from 80% of value to 95, 99% of the value. So I just want you, that's want you to know that, this is what this meeting is focused on. Now, I will go through the features relatively quickly, but what that means is that you can always go back and review this video if needed. And then the other thing is I want to mention my email here, hi@affluence.com. If you have any questions or feedback, please send me a message. I'd love to hear from you. And then also, I will also have I see a question just now. Can you share a link to the first webinar? Absolutely. If you go to affluence.com/webinars, you'll see a lot of our other webinars, including future ones on email management and so forth too. So thank you, Jennifer. I will definitely send you or send a message shortly. Actually, let me just type that right now. Okay, now let's get started. I do want to review the similar slides of what I've presented previously. And the reason for that is just want to give everyone here a quick recap of Matrix. Again, Matrix is a comprehensive email priority and project management software. So today we're going to dive into some of the advanced capabilities, especially inside teams, as well as how to manage projects and departments and so forth. A couple of points real quick around, again, what makes Matrix different from everything else. Remember, we use the 4 quadrants as the core methodology to promote effective prioritization. And Matrix is indeed Microsoft 365 Security certified. And actually, we're the only solution out there that's M365 Security certified for both our Outlook app, our Microsoft Teams app, as well as our web app. So that makes us a very unique value proposition. And if your IT ever gives you a hard time around installing or approving Matrix, make sure you let them know that. And then if you're IT, you can also feel better around approving Matrix as well. And today we actually get to look at some of the AI capabilities we have inside Matrix that we've added recently. Now, you've seen so much hype and all these news around AI capabilities and so forth. What we want to do is we want to take some of those AI and actually put it towards helping you achieve your goals and both your individual goals and team goals. So hopefully you'll see some of that capabilities. And then the one last note I have at the very bottom there is that Matrix is available as a SaaS solution, a HIPAA solution, an Azure GovCloud solution, as well as managed private Azure deployments. All of these solutions are actually hosted very differently. So if you ever have, you log into one and you don't see your data and so forth, just make sure that you're using the same one. I'll be showcasing the SaaS solution. That's the one that actually has the most capabilities in general. But if you're an existing customer and you're using one solution and you're interested in another solution, please reach out to us. And again, support or sales@affluence.com. I want to re-highlight the core concept around Matrix, which is the quote that's attributed to President Eisenhower: "What is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important." And so we take that and we put that into practice with the 4 quadrant methodology. And that is why when you open Matrix, you always see the 4 quadrants. Now, as you know, all of this is customizable, but the core idea is that you're taking everything you have to do and put it into the appropriate quadrants to help you focus your task for today at this moment in time. And again, I want to emphasize that when you use Matrix with the team, If you guys are finding disagreement on what your priorities are, that's when you know you've used Party Matrix correctly, right? If everyone's aligned, everyone always knows exactly what they need to focus on, no problem. You don't need a solution like ours. But what happens is that vast majority of the time, all of us have more things to do than the resources to do them. And when you find that disagreement in terms of priorities, then you can say, you know what, these are the things I can drop and these are the things I should focus on. So I want to keep that in the back of your mind as you're using the Party Matrix, whether or not you're getting value. And even if we could save you from doing one wrong thing, that's it, just one wrong thing every single day or every single week or every single month, and that saves you time for you to focus on something else that matters, then you know that you've received more value out of Party Matrix than the time you put in. And then there were some questions around, where you can watch some of the other webinars, affluence.com/webinars. If you go to that webpage, you'll see our this recorded webinar will be on there, but also our previous webinars and then also upcoming webinars. One of the things that we'll try to do in the next weeks, months, and so forth is actually highlighting all the various capabilities inside Party Matrix in order to talk about a deep dive into specific capabilities around your use cases and so forth. So today's webinar again is around advanced features inside Party Matrix, but at a more generic level. And that's what we'll look at. And if there's specific feedback or questions, that's something we can dive further in down the road. All right, now with that, I'm going to show you Party Matrix. And then again, we'll go through this relatively quickly. I am keeping an eye out on any chat that you might want to you send over. If you have any questions, or you want me to go into some details, I might not be able to answer right away, but I want to make sure that I'll try to address it afterwards. Okay, so first of all, let me go ahead and go back to the Party Matrix projects, right? Again, you're familiar with all of this. So let me dive into some of the advanced capabilities around that. First, I'm going to show you how to create a new project. Go and create a new project. But there's one big difference here now, as opposed to just a standard project, which we're going to call this a department project, because you probably know how to create a standard project already. One of the things I want to show you is this concept called user groups. One thing that happens all the time in organizations like yourself, but also, for everyone else too, is there's always turnovers in terms of employees. There's also always people added to an initiative or removed from an initiative. So we've created this concept called user group. What user group does is that you, instead of associating a project to some individuals, you associate to the whole group. You think of it as a department, let's say marketing or engineering or something like that. And so then whenever you have a new employee, you can add them to that group. And now they have access to all of those projects simultaneously instead of managing the permissions one at a time. Additionally, if you remove someone, then they also lose access to those projects. So when you go to groups here, you can have the associate user group. You see this little eye right here, this eye, if you click on this, what it does is it lets you jump to your user group management page. Now, admins, essentially people who are in charge of the account, can go and create different user groups than people who are not admins. So when you open this, depending on your role within the organization, you might have different choices. And so what you can do is you can create a new user group, and you can name it. Again, this doesn't have to be a department, doesn't have to be like marketing or sales or engineering. It could be anything. And so the way you do it is you click on this and then you start typing the user group that you want to create. So so for example, I'm going to do a test user group, right? Test user group right there. I can give and then you got to press enter. You type in the name of the user group, press enter. Now you have the name of the user group there. The description, just in case you want to add some note to what this user group entails. And then whether or not a private group or if you uncheck it, then it's a public group. That means other people can join it as well. But if it's a private group, then only the creator, you, would have the ability to modify this, and you can add a logo, etc. So that's all you got to do to create a user group. Very, very straightforward. And what happens is, let me show you an example here. When I go back to here and I'm creating a project, right? I have this user group hasn't been created yet, but I have an engineering user group, for example. And so when I go to engineering, I can create that. And again, I can change, the template as well as the color theme, right? So go ahead and go that, and I'll create the project. And you can see here, it says user group. And if you need to change a user group, that's all you got to do. But as you add people to this group, they get added to all of these projects. So you can imagine a lot of projects being engineering, or a lot of projects being sales. One thing you can do too is that what I encourage you to do is actually create these projects. And if you have initiatives where you need, the executive team to be on, that's where you create the user group so then everyone can get access to the appropriate project. The other thing you've seen, of course, is the ability to go and customize all of these quadrant names and the quadrant colors and so forth. One thing that I want to show you is the ability to create templates. Now that you've created a project and you've gone and you have investigated Party Matrix and you've created some best practices, one of the things that's really powerful is the ability for Party Matrix to go and help you from repetitive tasks. So example, let's just call this an employee onboarding. So actually I'll go ahead and create a new project and I'll call it an employee onboarding template, okay? I'm going to create an employee onboarding template. And imagine if whenever you bring on a new employee within your organization, you want them to do, 4 or 5 different tasks. So task 1, I'm going to say due in 2 weeks. Okay. Task 2, due in 1 month. Oh, actually, let me change this here. So due in 2 weeks. I think I missed the 2 there. So the system didn't know that it was due in 2 weeks. You can see when I'm hovering over this, it says, for example, task 2 is due in 1 month, and then task 1 is going to be due in 2 weeks once the system updates. Now that you've created, let's just say, this entire matrix inside Party Matrix, along with all the appropriate due dates and so forth, you can go to the top right here and you can save as, I'm sorry, you go to click on this first. This opens the project details, and then you can save this as a project template. So you haven't done this already. This is actually really cool. The way the template works is it takes everything you have inside your matrix and it copies it as a template. And then when you need to launch the template again, our system automatically inherit those due dates. So you can see here that you don't want to clear all item dates. If you set due dates, for example, again, in that example I just showed, you might have task 1 due in 2 weeks, task 2 due in 1 month, etc. If you press on this and it clears all the due dates, but if you don't, what it does is it inherits those due dates. And then the second thing is you might have tasks that are already completed, but this just marks them all as unfinished. So then it actually copies it into your template matrix. And then you can go ahead and create a template from that. Now, when I create a new project and I go back to here, you see how that actually this shows up. And then when you create a project from that template, you can choose the start date. So for example, that was due from today, but imagine if I have an employee starting on July 1st, I'm going to do July 1st here and I use template. And now you see that actually these tasks, the due dates would be 2 weeks from July 1st. As opposed to 2 weeks from today. So it's really, really useful way for you to actually create a, standard operating procedure, SOP, or again, employee onboarding templates, or imagine if you work with external clients or projects where you may have, task 1 that starts today, all the things you have to do today, and then all the way to things you have to do in a year, 2 years, 3 years, and so forth. Once you've created that matrix one time, you can just save that. And whenever you have a new customer, a new client, a new employee, you just launch from there, set the start date, and Party Matrix automatically creates all of those tasks for you. And you can imagine how much time and effort that would save you. And then the other thing I want to mention is that, if you go to the list view here, you see how all this information updates. If you go to calendar view here, all that information updates. Right here, I'm in June, but if I go July, I see all of those tasks. And then if you start modifying this, so let's just say you want to modify a template. All you've got to do is create a new project with that same template, make all the modification, and then save it again. The way the system saves a template is the template name itself. And so that's what makes it unique. So if you want to have an employee onboarding template and you modify it and you just, as long as you save it as employee onboarding template again, it'll update and replace the previous template. If you want to create a different type of template, then make sure you change the project name. So that's just keep that in the back of your mind. The other thing I want to show you is now that you have these templates in place, I want to show you capabilities around making these items a little bit more dependent on each other. So if you notice in the view here, one of the views is the Gantt chart. I'm sorry, this is the feed here. One of the views, the Gantt chart, right? For example, task 1 and task 2. If I want to go ahead and link these together, I would use something called dependency. So if I were to go and select this task here, you see how I can click on here in the Gantt chart, and then I can go to the resource section, and then I can link to the existing item. And so when you go to this view, what it does is actually search inside this project for the other task. Since I have only one other task, that's pretty straightforward. Now you have 5 different options. Related means these 2 tasks are related to each other. It's just a way for you to describe that these 2 tasks are related. There actually isn't any dependencies on them. It's just that it will mention in the chat section that, hey, this task is related to another. But then you can also use something called block by or blocks. So block by means that this task is blocked by the previous task, whereas you say this task blocks the next task. And then there's a second category, cause by and causes. Cause by is the same as block by, and blocks is the same as causes in terms of actual capabilities inside Protomatrix and how it's displayed. But in project management terminology, sometimes you want to actually have that as a differentiation. So for example, I'll go ahead and say blocked by task 2 is blocked by task 1, right? And that's all I got to do. And so when I do something like that in the resource section, it'll show that dependencies. Again, all of these capabilities go and inherit and then get saved to templates. And so it allows you to create all these very advanced relationship within your task. And again, that will save you a lot of effort and time down the road, especially if you have repeated process all the time. One thing I want to emphasize around Protomatrix is how many projects you might end up having. I actually have 300 plus projects across all different spectrum that I'm in. Now, there are projects I'm not in as well, but for the ones that I'm in. So what that means is that, the full gamut of what all those projects entails. One thing that I think is helpful is when you think about Protomatrix projects is that there are 3 types. What I call transient. These are projects that come and go, right? They have a start date and have an end date. An example might be a working relationship with a customer, right? Where you have the starts today and ends in 6 months or something like that, or a consultant customer in that case. And so then you have those transient projects. But then you might have persistent projects. Persistent projects are those that last forever. So for example, we have within Affluent itself, we have 15 different projects related to product. For example, our Mac app, Windows app, iOS app, web app, as well as our integrations all have their own distinct projects, and those things last forever. So when you have projects that are repeated, but also might be launched over and over again for a specific purpose, that's when you really want to use template. The moment, one other note I want to mention too is when you do share the template when you save a template, it does share within your team. So what's really nice about that is then someone else can also launch that. There's a good reason for that, which is one, knowledge retention is really important. I just want to step back for a second and explain that. And this is one of those things that I think makes Protomatrix shine, which is imagine if your key employee or your key stakeholder leave your organization today. Will you know what they were working on? And then more importantly, will you know what they consider to be priorities, right? Because they have all this domain expertise, knowledge expertise that's inside their head that they're not able to express and tell you. So with Protomatrix, when you ask everyone to note all that down and have it inside Protomatrix, then when that person leaves, you can take over the project, look at it, and understand what their priorities are. Similarly, if you have someone who's very, very good at processes and is able to create this step-by-step guideline, when you ask them to create this Protomatrix project and then save it as a template, now suddenly that knowledge is preserved within your organization. So if that person leaves 6 months from now, you don't lose that. And so again, that's a reason why I strongly encourage you to use this capability because of how powerful it is. All right, so I've talked about projects, I've talked about templates. You saw how to create Gantt charts. And again, you can go and you can imagine creating more tasks and link all these things together. The other thing I want to talk about is actually, I'll just actually go down this menu here. What happens is the ability to create linked item. So earlier we saw how I created I linked to an existing item, and then I create that, I choose that this task is caused by or blocked by the previous task. What I can also do is if I don't have a task yet, I can actually go and create a linked item directly from here. So you see how when I create this linked item, I have the option to say that, hey, this new linked item essentially blocks or causes and so forth. So for example, again, I'll go to here, blocked by task 3 due in 3 months here, right? And I choose the project it belongs in, and I add that. And you can see, actually, I believe now it jumps to task 3, and essentially it creates the task here and it links those items together for you as well. This is actually really useful. I use this all the time, the create linked item and choose related, just because sometimes you may have multiple tasks for one specific purpose. And so being able to choose that these tasks are all related to each other, just keep them in sync and be able to jump back and forth. Because when you go to the chat section here, one thing you'll see is that it actually mentions those linked tasks as well. So then when I'm in the chat, I can actually just click on this, and then I can jump back and forth between the previous tasks. You see how it makes it very easy for me to navigate, especially if you have these linked tasks that are actually in other projects. So the ability to link tasks actually works across projects as well. So it's not just within one project. You can say these tasks are related. And so if somebody else has permission to access the other project, they can link those tasks together, and then you can jump back and forth between them. Very, very useful when you're working with a complex task with a lot of different dependencies. So that's linked tasks. Move item, this is relatively straightforward to another project. Version control. So version control, what it does is it actually shows you the history of that task over time. And you can think of it just like inside, Microsoft or Google Docs, where you're able to go and revert to a previous version. Let's just say you accidentally changed something and you want to see, hey, what happened to that? Version control allows you to go and review that. And you can click on each of these to review. If you want to revert to a previous version, all you got to do is click on this little green icon here when you hover over a previous version. So if that's how you want to revert to a task that was modified, unintentionally, that's what you can do. So that's version control. The other thing is this concept called print chat. Actually, this stemmed from customer needs. And so customers like you, one of the things that I've talked about before is, for example, we have a customer in a compliance space where they have to prove that they get certain things done at a certain time. It is extremely important that they do that. So then when they use the chat section, that's where all the record of all the changes are kept. So what that means is that, these, items due on a certain date. That means we mark them as done on a certain date, and Matrix keeps what's called an immutable record, right? It cannot be changed. It's part of the record for the task. Print chat is a way for you to export that. So then you can save it as a history or record, or prove that these things are done at a certain time. And then conflicts, the next part of conflicts here is essentially when you have multiple people editing a task at the same time, you might override each other. And so start seeing conflicts is just a way for you to compare different versions of those tasks. One thing that I want to mention down here too is this additional menu here, and just in case you're not aware, but it's very similar to the top one, but you can mention another item. And so again, linking all these items together is actually very useful for people to stay informed on tasks that are relevant to each other. That's very different, by the way, from the subtask. So if you're not aware as well, to create a subtask in Matrix, all you got to do is, click on that and start typing the subtask. And let's say you have 5 subtasks. When you mark 2 as done, it becomes, 40% completed. The progress bar automatically update. So that's another thing I want to mention. Now I'm going to pause there. And again, I want to make sure if there's any questions that you have, you can go ahead and send in the chat, and I'll try to make sure that I address them. And I do go through this relatively quickly because I have the assumption that you are familiar with Matrix already. And so, if you have to, you can always look back here. Now I'm going to dive into a totally different topic, which is our AI capabilities. This is one of those things where, we're super excited about it because I think AI gives you so much potential to be productive. It's also potential for you to be distracted and also, may not give you the correct insight. So there's always that caveat. Keep that in mind. But I want to show you several capabilities we have around AI. The first is actually turning your goals into action items. So there's a link here. I'm going to send this to everyone here in the chat. If you're logged in, you go to this page. The UI asks you a simple question. So what's your goal, right? So for example, my goal might be increase webinar attendance. Okay. That's it. I just wanted to type that goal, increase webinar attendance. Let me give you some examples here, what you might want to type. Imagine if you want to get a promotion, or, imagine if you have a department goal, or imagine if you want to start planning out your fiscal year 2024, something like that. You can actually just type it into our system and then click build my action plans. So what's going on, what's happening right now is what Matrix is doing is it takes that simple goal and it starts looking at ideas out there that exist in the internet universe on what are some of the action items you can take to actually achieve that goal. And so this is actually happening in the background. And when it's ready, you can actually jump to that project. But it does take a little bit of time, like maybe 30 seconds to a minute, depending on the complexity. And then in the meantime, when you're going through this, you can click on move on, but I can talk to you a little bit more about this in the meantime. But one thing that I'd like you to potentially explore, which is think about some of your overarching goals, especially things that are a little bit more generic, and you're just thinking it through for the very first time. You're able to use Party Matrix to create that action plan, and you'll see what that action plan looks like. For example, I have one that's here, which is increase sales by 20%. Imagine if you're in charge of your sales department and you type into Party Matrix increase sales by 20%. This is the project that Party Matrix built for you. And so you can see that actually, and by the way, what happens is we have no idea what the outcome of these results would be, right? That's the beauty of this. That's the beauty of generative AI. But what happens is it is getting some best practices. And so you can go and you can take a look at this. When you click through each of these action items, it actually gives you a timeline, for example, due in a month and due in 2 months, et cetera. And then in the notes section, it gives you some details. So play around with it and see if it can help you. The other thing I want to talk about is this inside the notes section, there's something called fill with AI. So let me go to a task, for example, increase product offerings. And then I go and I click fill with AI. What this capability does is it looks at just this action item here and then actually goes in and makes some suggestions, right? These AI generated suggestions. You see how actually I just click on that now, generated this, and it actually creates a bunch of subtasks for you. You can think of this as maybe a task that you have and you want to assign to somebody, and that task might be, again, redesign your website or something like that. And so this is essentially a smaller version of what you just saw at the project level, and then create some of these subtasks for you. None of this is supposed to be perfect. And so it's just suggestions that will save you time down the road. So play with it. And we actually have very, very positive feedback from customers who's using this just because it gives them a whole new way of thinking. And hopefully that'll give you some benefit as well. So that's the AI capabilities inside Party Matrix. Now, I want to show you some of the other things, the other integrations that we have that maybe you're not taking advantage of yet. And that's something called connectors. So if you go to, let me see here. If you go to your account inside Party Matrix, you can go down to connectors here. And if you go to connectors, this actually shows you several integrations that we have with other third-party applications. So this is not, exhaustive, but these are the ones that you can connect with very, very easily. So for example, you can connect to Jira, you can connect to Outlook Calendar, Microsoft To Do, Planner, Azure DevOps, Zoom, Zendesk. And when you click on this connect, it will ask you to authenticate. And what it's doing, the way it works is it's a one-way sync. And actually when you go to this page, you'll see a little bit more details. So what it does is it takes the tasks that you have in each of these other platform and then pulls it into specific projects inside Protomatrix. So for example, if I want to go and connect my Outlook calendar, right, what it's going to do is it'll ask me to sign in. I authorize it, and then when I have done that, you see how it actually creates this project for me called the Outlook calendar events. And then if I have Outlook calendar events, it actually pulls it in here for me. And then as I modify my Outlook calendar, it actually imports it into Protomatrix for me. It's not a two-way sync, it's a one-way sync, but it allows you to see everything that's happening from other data sources inside Protomatrix itself. So we actually have really useful integration with Zendesk, for example. So when you send us a support ticket to support@affluence.com, it actually creates a message inside Zendesk, and then from Zendesk, it actually syncs over into Protomatrix. And so everyone's able to look at it and respond to it and so forth, have a conversation about those specific emails or specific tickets without actually polluting each other's email address and or email inbox. So that's just something that you can explore on your own. Essentially, if any of those integrations look interesting to you, all you have to do is authorize it. You can connect all of those or one or two, depending on your needs. And speaking of external integrations, there's two other things that we have that you can also add in, which is our Edge extension as well as our Chrome extension. So if you went and you searched for Protomatrix for Edge here, and when you do that, you'll see that we have the result here, and you're able to add the Protomatrix for Edge extension. So I actually have it installed here, and so what this allows you to do is take any page that you're browsing on Edge and convert it into a task. So for example, if I click on this, it opens up this, and if you've never used the application before, I'll ask you to sign in, and all you have to do is authorize it. And once you do, this extension shows up inside your Edge, and you right click on it, you can always pin it. And so that keeps it open, which is actually really, really helpful. And then if I click on this and I choose create new action item, one thing that will happen is that it'll create the task for me. I can assign it to different people and I can set due dates and so forth. One use case for this is, let's just say you have SharePoints or you have another third-party application that's web app or web-based or something like that, and you actually want to create Protomatrix action items from those apps. All you got to do is browse to that page, go here, and then you send to Protomatrix. And let me show you how it looks. The moment I've done that, I go here and I go to the basic Eisenhower matrix, which is the page that I was on. And I can click on this Protomatrix for Edge, and you see how it created the task. It has a link to that web page. Again, you can think of this web page as your SharePoint or your intranet or whatever it is. It doesn't really matter. You can do the exact same thing on both Edge and Chrome. And then it actually also takes a screenshot for you to attach it. So very, very useful if you're using it to assign someone a web page and say, hey, take a look at this. Maybe it's a competitor, maybe it's a web page design or a file or document. And so when you do something like this, resources gets created, two resources. The first resource is a screenshot of the page, and the second resource is the link to the page itself. I use this all the time, especially when I'm browsing something and say, hey, you know what, this is actually really relevant. And I want someone else to see it, I assign it to them via this method. And by the way, now that I'm back to here, you see that my action plan is ready. So maximize webinar attendance was created by our AI. So I'm going to open it. And by the way, this is my first time seeing this. So I have no idea what our system would create because it's truly unique every single time based on your goal. And so you see how here, one thing it's done is it shows me the low effort, high impact task, high effort, high impact task. You notice that actually this is a very different matrix than a standard matrix, because one of the things we want to do is we want to give you guidelines on what are the things that will give you the most impact, the most bang for the buck. And so again, if you were to browse through this, maybe it'll give you some ideas on what are the things that that you should invest your effort in. Again, very, very helpful for both personal goals as well as department goals and so forth. And then when you're ready, you can click on here and invite your team members so they can see it, and you start assigning the tasks and so forth, or modifying them as needed. Now, I'm going to jump into Microsoft Teams because I think that's where we have some pretty powerful integrations that I think will could potentially benefit you. And I think I've covered this in previous webinars as well. But again, I just want to go through this really quickly, just in case you're not familiar. But we're probably the most integrated solution inside Teams. What the reason we do that is because we realize how much time all of us spend in a Teams conversation in the Teams app, right? You know, you're chatting and you're talking about all these different things. And so because of that, you know, we want Party Matrix to work inside Teams and work really well inside Teams, so then you don't have to switch contacts. And so you can actually spend the vast majority of your time inside Teams and access Party Matrix in there without ever having to go to our web app. And in fact, that's how I use it. I use a lot. I use our application inside Teams, you know, 95% of the time. Now, when you go to Teams, remember if you click on this plus icon, you can choose Party Matrix. And when you do, you have two different views. I wanted to highlight one thing, which is actually pretty cool. You saw the one-on-one before, because I probably talked about that multiple times before, which is the ability for you to see the task with somebody across all your across your entire Party Matrix. But the other thing is the full project view. But one thing I want to choose in particular is actually the read-only view. This is the use case here is actually a way for you to share a party matrix within the organization and let people know what the team or department priorities may be. So what that means is go ahead and create a project called, you know, hey, this is our quarterly goals or something like that, but you don't want anyone else to modify it. Once you create that, you can go to the tab, add the tab, make it read only. Now everyone can go and see the details of those goals without being able to modify them. Only the people who do have access to the project can modify them. But that's a really, really useful way to share projects inside Party Matrix. So you see how I can add that, and it shows up here. Now, you know, that same matrix that I've just shown you inside the web app is here, and you see how I can go and look at these tasks. I can click on them and learn more about them, but I'm not able to modify any of this stuff. I can only read it. And so to modify them, you actually have to open Party Matrix and actually change them. So it's a read only here as well. The other thing that I think is actually really useful, and me personally, I'm using this more and more, is taking a Teams conversation and converting to a task. So if you go to this dot, dot, dot here, you know, and you create PM item, what it's doing is actually it'll create a task from that chat that you have with your teammate. This will save you time instead of having to open Party Matrix, then create a task. You can do that directly from here. In fact, you can even decide which project it belongs in, which quadrants, right? And then, you know, the due date as well. When you click on this, it'll automatically change to today, but you can always, of course, change it, and you can click create. And now I have this option to actually share this item in chat. So this is actually really neat because what Party Matrix does is it's called a link unfurling. And so what it does is it actually takes the Party Matrix action card and it sends this here. So when you have a teammate and you have a Party Matrix action item you want to share with them, you see how I'm able to send that over to them. And now the my teammate can look at this. They can click on view item and open the Party Matrix action item, or they can save it as a task, or they can actually modify it directly from here. Again, I don't even have to jump into Party Matrix to make all these changes. I'm literally doing inside the Teams conversation. You see how if I open that, it actually opens this up, and now I can change, I can add conversation. Now, one thing I want to mention is this chat right here is specific to this item. It's within the context of this item. Happens all the time that you're talking about, you know, a task in chat, a task in email, and then in-person meeting and so forth. And then afterwards, you know, you lose the context of what it is that you've been talking about for any specific action item. So I always strongly encourage everyone to use the chat section within each Party Matrix task itself. The reason being is that now it's kept, again, as part of that immutable record, right? So in 6 months, in a year, in 2 years, when someone else needs to review this and take a look and say, hey, when and why did we make those decisions? They can look at the chat section here and have that full record and full history, as opposed to just, you know, typing the chat inside the Teams conversation itself. Now, if you click on this dot, 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 you can also open up Party Matrix and you can search for any of the Party Matrix action cards in order to paste it right here. If you go to the team section, so you saw how here I'm in the chat section, I can do it, you add that one-on-one, but in the team section, I can do the exact same thing. I can still open up Pretty Matrix and I can actually paste one of these projects as well. One cool thing here is if I put a project, I can actually skip the read-only part of it and actually add a project, and then all the team members who's in this teams group will be invited to the project. So that's a way for me to actually manage projects using the access control from the Microsoft Teams group itself. Now, there's a whole new set of capabilities that we've just launched with Microsoft. So there was a Microsoft Build conference just 2 weeks ago, and we actually are launching several advanced capabilities within Microsoft Teams. And I'm not going to be able to go too much details into that today, but you can start exploring this. And so if you go to the App Store, obviously before, you can search for Pretty Matrix. But if you search for Pretty Matrix now, one thing you'll see is actually this whole new section called Workflows. And what workflows is, it's automation. So you can think of an if this, then that scenario, which means, for example, you can see here, if there's a Microsoft form submission, right, create a task in Pretty Matrix, or celebrate when a task is completed, or when a task is overdue, move it to quadrant 1. So, people have questions all the time, which is, hey, I've created a task in quadrant 2, 3, 4, but now, it's overdue. Can I move, can the system automatically move it to quadrant 1? In the past, we don't do that, because that's something you just do manually, and mostly because, each organizations or each team member may go and create different quadrant names. So quadrant 1 does not always mean urgency. But in your case, if it does, you're able to use this workflow to automatically move all the tasks in a specific project to a specific quadrant when it's overdue. So this is what you need. You go to here and then click on each of these and then start authorizing it. Now you do need a license, not of just Pretty Matrix, but also Power Automate, which is the Microsoft Flow application. So if your organization has that already, then this will just work right out of the box. But if you don't have that, then you can actually sign up for a trial of Microsoft Flow. So unfortunately, that's something that does require an add-on on the Microsoft side. So now let me go back to Pretty Matrix here, because I want to make sure that I cover some of the final capabilities inside Pretty Matrix, because, again, you get 80% of the value from Pretty Matrix by using just the quadrants and prioritizing tasks and assigning them and setting due dates and so forth. What happens all the time is that you end up wanting to take Pretty Matrix and then connect it to other things. So there's one thing I want to show you here, which is when you have a project, as I have here, every project has a calendar. So if you click on this little eye icon, it opens the project details. There's a little thing called, this is the project details, but at the very bottom here, there's a get calendar link. So if you click on this get calendar link, right, and it actually will copy, you just click on this and it'll copy the link. And if I were to go to my Outlook, I can actually go to the calendar view in Outlook. I can add a calendar and I can say subscribe from web, and I can paste that calendar in right here. And I can choose the color. And I can call this maximize webinar attendance. Again, imagine if you use our goal project and you created a goal to, for your departments to improve your efficiency or improve sales, etc. You can go and copy that link, create a calendar here, and you click import. And now you can see that if I were to go here, it actually shows me all of those tasks that I have from Pretty Matrix. And actually I can go and I can click on those tasks and see the details around each of those tasks inside Pretty Matrix, but right here in Outlook. And so every project has its own calendar and you can subscribe to that, especially if there's important projects. If you have important projects, it's always a good idea to be on top of them. And so that's how you can use that capability. And then I just have a few more things I want to show, which is to go down the list here on the left panel, just in case you're not aware of all of these already. The first is in the home section. When you're in the home section, you notice that there's the alert view, the visited, the agenda, and the my item here. This is if you have due dates, it'll start showing up in your agenda. And so actually it only shows you the things that are overdue from yesterday. If you scroll down, then you can see everything else that's way overdue. And then if you were to go to my item here, you can actually do a lot of filtering. So you can filter for item that you own, which means that's been assigned to you, or items you follow. And then if you want to go and select multiple items, you can actually just click on this, and then you can select all the items in order to mark them as done or update them, etc., or move them, etc. The other thing I want to show you now is the report section. So if you go to the report section, you see two types of reports, the general report and the workload report. So if you go to the general report, what happens is on the day-to-day basis, and on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, and quarterly basis, there's actually reports that generate for you. And so you can actually click on open here. And what it's showing you is it actually shows you all the information, everything from new tasks or overdue tasks, et cetera, directly from this view inside the report. The other view is the workload management view. The workload management view shows everybody's, all your teammates' task and how much they have over time. It's just a good way to understand people's workload and make sure that, no one's overwhelmed with too many things on their plate. And so it's very, very visual, and you can see how, I can see, oh, maybe this person has a lot of tasks on this particular dates. And so if I want to assign them something, maybe I shouldn't choose that date or that week, etc. If you click on this number here, it actually opens up and shows you the actual task itself. And if you use effort, you can actually change this view over to effort and schedule hours instead of number of items. So the way the system works is number of items assumes that all the items are equal. Now, of course, we know that not all tasks are created equal. Some tasks just have a lot more work associated with them. And so if you choose effort, what we do is we assume that every task is 1 hour. So then you can choose go to effort instead, or if you actually override that by changing the effort on a task, then that will update accordingly. The other thing I want to show you here is the calendar. Now, this calendar is called the global calendar. What it's doing is it actually shows you all the tasks that you have, but across all your projects, as opposed to the calendar view on a per project basis. You can see it's very, very overwhelming because there's so many things going on here. But if you wanted an overview of all the things that's due across your entire Proto Matrix, that's where you go to. When you go to the search view, there's one thing I want to bring to your attention, which is the ability for you to actually connect to let me see here, to Microsoft Office 365. So if you were to go here, this might be hidden for you, but if you look down here, there's an option of click show. If you connect to Office 365, you can actually see your Office 365 tasks within the search view as well. And then there's a few preset filters, but if you go to the top right filters here, you can actually see a lot more details. And you can search across your entire Proto Matrix based on the item name, based on when things are modified, based on project tags, item tags, and whether or not it's in star project, etc. So there's a lot of stuff that we can't cover here, but if you went to this filter view, you can see that there's many different ways for you to find information that you need across your entire Proto Matrix. We also have the Gantt chart here, but this is something that exists in the desktop app, but not in the web app. But this is the global Gantt chart. If you used our native Windows or Mac app, you would see this. But again, you should be able to access the Gantt chart for every single project by going to the project itself and then changing the view. And then the feed, this is a global feed, right? Essentially, it shows you all the changes that's happening across your entire Proto Matrix, across all your projects. I use this as a way to see where activities are. So let's just say, you have a lot of different tasks that you want to be on top of, and you want to have an awareness of where people are spending their time. That's where you go. Now, with that, I'm actually going to take a pause and we'll see if there's any questions, because I think we're actually wrapping up here due to time. But one of the things you saw during this webinar is that we address a lot of different capabilities, and they reflect so many different other components of Proto Matrix that may not be useful for you today, but might be useful for specific use cases that you may have within your organization. Because not everyone will use Gantt chart, not everyone will use reports, but for those who do, that's how you access them. Are there any questions? So now that we're wrapping up, one thing I want to point out is that one of the areas where we'll be investing time in is actually to talk about specific use cases more relevant to everything from your job title, your job function, or the kind of organization that you are, and then doing a webinar that's more tailored to those specific use cases. So then we can walk you through how to use Party Matrix and how to leverage Party Matrix capabilities for that specific purpose. One of the things I want to ask you today is if you have specific feedback or if you have specific needs on some of these areas and use cases, please reach out to us. Please send us feedback for that. So then we are aware of, where customer interests are, because we actually have customers from all spectrum of industry and users from all different job titles and job function. So, for us, if we identify areas where we can actually go and really show Party Matrix capabilities that are very, very useful to those specific functions, then we'd be happy to do that to ensure that, you will get the most value out of Party Matrix. And so I do want to thank you and thank you everyone here for your time today. So with that, I'm going to wrap up and end this webinar if there's no more questions. But again, you can always reach out to me at hi@affluence.com, or also send us support@affluence.com with any specific feedback. And then this webinar will be posted because again, we went through a lot here, and if you need to review any specific features, you can go ahead and do that. Thank you, everyone.